The morning mist clung to the valleys like a living thing, thick and cold, turning the Colorado Rockies into a landscape of ghosts. Jack Morrison stood at the edge of the ravine behind his rented cabin, his hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug that had gone cold an hour ago. He didn't notice. The coffee had stopped tasting like anything months ago, same as everything else. He was 34, but felt ancient. The kind of old that settles into your bones when you've seen friends die and can't figure out why you're still breathing. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. His face was all hard angles and weathered skin, dark stubble shadowing a jaw that had forgotten how to smile. Close-cropped hair, military short, showed threads of premature silver at the temples. His eyes were the worst part, pale gray like winter ice, empty in a way that made strangers look away. 3 months he'd been hiding in Pine Ridge, a dying Colorado mining town clinging to the side of a mountain like a tick on a dying dog. Population maybe 200, most of them old-timers waiting to follow their town into the grave. No one asked questions, no one cared. It was exactly what he needed. At his feet, Titan shifted position with a soft huff of breath. The Belgian Malinois was a study in controlled power, 87 pounds of muscle and devotion wrapped in a coat of tan and black. The dog's dark eyes tracked a bird crossing the valley below, but his body remained relaxed, patient, waiting. Always waiting for Jack to give a damn about something. 4 years they'd been together, 4 years of firefights and night raids and the kind of operations that never made the news. Titan had saved his life in Mosul, again in Kabul, and one last time outside Jalalabad when everything went to hell and Jack's entire world came apart in blood and fire and screaming. The dog had taken shrapnel, pulling him to cover. Jack had taken shrapnel everywhere else, but the wounds on his body had healed. The ones in his head hadn't. 3 men. 3 good men. Rodriguez, Chen, Williams. They'd trusted him, followed his orders, died because Jack had made the wrong call at the wrong time. The official report said tactical misjudgment. The unofficial whispers said he'd frozen. Either way, 3 families got folded flags, and Jack got a medical discharge and a prescription for pills he didn't take because feeling nothing was better than feeling what waited underneath. A sudden sharp bark snapped him back to the present. Titan was on his feet, head cocked, ears forward, alert but not alarmed, interested. "What is it?" Jack's voice came out rusty from disuse. He'd spoken maybe 20 words in the past week. The dog barked again, softer this time, and nosed at Jack's leg. Then he trotted a few steps toward the tree line and looked back, tail giving a single, purposeful wag. "You need to go out?" Jack checked his watch. 0647 hours. Their usual walk wasn't until 0700, but routine was just something to pass the time anyway. "All right, let me get your vest." Inside the cabin, everything was military neat because old habits died hard. Bed made with hospital corners, dishes washed and stacked, gear laid out in precise order. The only thing out of place was the bottle of bourbon on the counter, half empty, that Jack stared at every night and occasionally lost arguments with. He grabbed Titan's tactical vest from its hook, the same one they'd both worn overseas. Black nylon with reinforced handles and molly webbing for attachments. The dog's entire demeanor changed the moment the vest settled onto his back. Pet mode off, professional mode on. His posture straightened, his focus sharpened, and suddenly he wasn't a companion animal anymore. He was a tool, a weapon, a brother in arms. They headed out into the forest, following the trail Jack had walked every morning since arriving. 2 miles up to a clearing with a view of the valley, then back. Exercise for the body, distraction for the mind, survival for both of them. But today Titan had other plans. About half a mile up, the dog suddenly veered off trail, pushing through a thick stand of pine. Jack followed automatically, his body remembering patrol formation even though his mind was still back in that cabin with the bourbon. One hand went to his hip where his sidearm should have been, but he'd left the SIG locked in the gun safe, trying to be a civilian. Pretending he knew how. "Tighten, heel," he commanded quietly. The dog ignored him. That was wrong. Tighten didn't break from commands. His training was absolute, beaten into him through thousands of repetitions until obedience was deeper than instinct. If he was ignoring orders, it meant something had overridden that training. It meant he'd found something. Jack's pulse kicked up despite himself. The familiar chemical rush of adrenaline hit his system, sharpening everything. The way shadows fell between trees. The texture of pine needles under his boots, the exact angle of Titan's ears as he pushed, through underbrush with single-minded purpose. They emerged onto a rocky outcropping Jack had never noticed before, though he'd walked past this spot a dozen times. The ground dropped away sharply, revealing a slope littered with boulders and scrub brush. And there, half hidden behind a collapsed chain-link fence and overgrown with vegetation, was a hole in the mountain, a mineshaft, old, abandoned, dangerous. A faded sign hung crooked from a rotting post. Danger, no trespassing, abandoned mine. The letters were barely legible, eaten away by decades of weather. Titan approached the entrance carefully, nose working overtime. He sniffed the ground, the fence posts, the timber framing the opening. Then he went still, that particular kind of stillness Jack had seen 100 times before. Target acquired. The dog looked back at him and barked once. Sharp, clear, unmistakable. The alert bark. Jack's blood went from warm to ice water in a single heartbeat. He knew that bark, had heard it, when Titan found IEDs buried under trash piles in Ramadi, when he'd detected a suicide bomber in a crowd in Kabul, when he'd located a wounded soldier trapped under rubble after a mortar strike. It meant, something here. Come see. Come now. What'd you find, boy? Jack moved closer, pulling out his phone for the flashlight. The beam cut into the darkness, revealing damp stone walls and a dirt floor scattered with debris. The air breathing out of the opening was cold and stale, thick with the smell of mineral deposits and standing water and something else, something organic. Titan barked again, more insistent. He took 3 steps into the shaft, then stopped and looked back. His meaning was crystal clear. Follow me. Every ounce of common sense Jack had left screamed at him to turn around. Abandoned mines were death traps, toxic gases, unstable ground, vertical shafts that dropped into flooded chambers. The mountains were full of them, and every year some idiot tourist got themselves killed playing explorer. But Titan didn't freelance, didn't chase rabbits or bark at shadows. If he was alerting, there was something in there worth finding. Jack stood at the entrance, torn between training and instinct, between the man he'd been and the ghost he'd become. The logical thing was to call it in, let the authorities handle it. But the authorities were 20 miles away on a Saturday morning, and if there was someone in there that needed help, every minute mattered. He checked his phone. 1 bar of signal, enough. He typed out a quick text to 3 contacts. Sheriff's office, his sister in Denver, his old team leader in Virginia. At abandoned mineshaft approximately 2 miles north of cabin on Forest Service Road 347. Investigating with K9. If no contact within 2 hours, send response. He hit send and watched until the message showed delivered. Then he looked at Titan, who was watching him with absolute trust and absolute certainty. "All right," Jack said, his voice dropping into the command tone he hadn't used in months. "You've got point. Slow pace. Show me." The dog moved forward, and Jack followed him into the darkness. The temperature dropped the moment they crossed the threshold, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. Jack's breath puffed out in visible clouds as his flashlight beam swept the tunnel. The walls were rough-hewn rock, glistening with moisture that ran in thin rivulets toward the floor. Old timber supports lined the passage every 10 feet or so, but most were rotting, some already collapsed into piles of splinters and rusty nails. The floor was treacherous, uneven dirt, and loose stone that shifted under his boots. Every step kicked up puffs of dust that hung in the still air, ancient particles that had been settled for decades before he disturbed them. Titan moved with careful precision, nose to the ground, stopping every few yards to test the air. His training was showing through. He was working a scent trail, following something Jack couldn't detect, but the dog's 40 times more powerful nose tracked effortlessly. Jack's mind automatically cataloged details. Tunnel width, approximately 4 feet. Ceiling height, variable, between 5 and 7 feet. Structural integrity, extremely poor. Visibility, less than 20 feet, even with the flashlight. Escape routes, 1. The way they'd come in. They descended at a slight angle, the tunnel twisting to follow some long-depleted vein of silver or gold or whatever precious metal had lured men into this hole a century ago. Water dripped somewhere ahead, a steady rhythm that echoed strangely in the confined space. The sound made it hard to hear anything else. They'd been walking maybe 8 minutes when Titan froze. Not the alert posture this time, something different. His head dropped low, ears pinned back, and he let out a whine so soft Jack almost missed it. Jack's hand moved instinctively toward his hip again, finding nothing. What is it? The dog didn't move, didn't advance, just stood there, trembling slightly, staring ahead into the darkness beyond Jack's flashlight beam. Jack raised the light, sweeping it forward. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, maybe 20 feet across and 10 feet high. Natural formation, probably, widened by mining operations and then abandoned. And on the far side, crumpled against the rough stone wall like a broken doll, was a human figure. Jack's training took over, overriding the shock. "Federal operator," he called out, even though he wasn't federal anymore, wasn't really anything. "Can you hear me?" No response. The figure didn't move. He advanced carefully, light and attention split between the person and the chamber itself, checking for threats, for secondary devices, for anything that might make this situation worse. But there was nothing. Just stone and shadows and a person who shouldn't be here. As he got closer, details resolved. Female, mid-20s, long dark hair matted with dirt and what might be blood. Blue jacket torn at the shoulder, jeans, hiking boots. Her hands were behind her back, and even from 6 feet away Jack could see the white plastic of zip-tie restraints cutting into her wrists. Her ankles were similarly bound. A strip of cloth had been tied across her mouth as a gag. But her chest was moving, shallow breaths, but breaths. She was alive. "Hey!" Jack dropped to his knees beside her, his voice automatically shifting to the tone he'd used with wounded soldiers. Calm. Steady. Authoritative without being threatening. "My name is Jack. I'm here to help. You're safe now." The woman's eyes opened, unfocused and glassy. When they landed on him, something flickered across her face. Recognition that she was no longer alone. Hope. Then, immediately after, raw terror. She tried to pull away, a muffled sound of panic forcing its way around the gag. "Easy, easy." Jack kept his hands visible, movements slow and deliberate. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm former military. My dog found you. We're going to get you out of here." Titan moved closer, his demeanor completely transformed. The tactical alertness was gone, replaced by something gentle, almost tender. He sat beside the woman and very carefully licked her cheek once, then rested his head near her shoulder. Something about that simple gesture broke through her panic. The woman's body sagged, tension bleeding out of her, and tears started cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face. Jack reached for the gag first, his fingers finding the knot behind her head. "This is going to feel weird for a second. Your jaw's going to hurt. Don't try to talk right away." He loosened the cloth and pulled it free. The woman gasped, coughing, her lips cracked and bleeding. Her tongue was swollen, probably from dehydration. "Water," she croaked. "Please." Jack pulled his camelback around and held the tube to her lips. Small sips. "If you drink too fast, you'll vomit." She drank desperately, water spilling down her chin. After a few swallows, she pulled back, gasping. "Thank you. God, thank you. What's your name?" Jack asked, already reaching for his multi-tool to cut the zip ties. Maya Brennan." Her voice was barely a whisper, raw and broken. How long have I been here?" "I don't know." "How long do you think?" 3 days? 4? I lost track. It's so dark." She flinched as Jack cut the zip tie on her wrists. Blood flow returned to her hands, and she whimpered in pain. "I know it hurts. It'll pass." He moved to her ankles, cutting those restraints as well. The plastic had cut deep, drawing blood. "Can you move your legs?" She tried and screamed. A sharp, agonized sound that echoed off the stone walls. "My ankle. I think it's broken." Jack did a quick assessment, his combat medic training making the examination automatic. Left ankle was definitely fractured, swollen to twice normal size, and already showing signs of infection from the dirty water she'd been lying in. She also had symptoms of severe dehydration, possible hypothermia despite it being summer outside, and probable head trauma based on the way she was having trouble focusing. "Okay," he said. "Change of plans. I'm going to carry you out." "There's no other way." You can't carry me that far, ma'am." The command voice came out sharper than he intended. "I've carried wounded men through 5 miles of desert while taking fire. You're maybe 120 soaking wet, and this tunnel is less than half a mile." "I can manage." He softened his tone slightly. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Maya looked at him for a long moment, really seeing him for the first time. Saw the hard competence in his eyes, the absolute certainty in his posture. Saw someone who knew exactly what he was doing and wouldn't accept failure. She nodded. Jack positioned himself carefully, then lifted her in a fireman's carry, settling her weight across his shoulders. She was lighter than he'd estimated, maybe 1 to 10. Nothing. "Tighten lead," he commanded. The dog turned and started back the way they'd come, moving at a steady pace that Jack could follow. He fell into the rhythm of movement, breathing controlled, steps measured. The weight on his shoulders was negligible. He'd carried much more, much farther, under much worse conditions. But something was different this time. Maybe it was because the person he was carrying was alive, not wounded or dying. Maybe it was because this mission had a clear objective and a clear path to success. Or maybe it was just that, for the first time in 9 months, he had a purpose beyond surviving until tomorrow. Maya whimpered occasionally when his movements jarred her broken ankle, but she didn't cry out. Tough, Jack thought. She'd survived days in this hell alone. She was a fighter. The walk back to the entrance felt longer than the walk in, but that was just perception. Jack counted his steps, measured his breathing, ignored. The burn starting in his shoulders and legs. 200 yards, 300, 400. Then, finally, blessed daylight appeared ahead. A gray circle at the end of the tunnel that widened as they approached, and suddenly they were out, back in the real world, where the air was clean and the sun was shining, and everything wasn't trying to kill them. Jack lowered Maya carefully to the ground, propping her against a tree. His phone had signal again, 2 bars this time. Thank Christ. He dialed 911, and the dispatcher answered on the first ring. "Emergency services. What's your emergency?" This is Jack Morrison. I'm at an abandoned mine shaft approximately 2 miles north of Pine Ridge on Forest Service Road 347. I have an injured female, mid-20s, approximately 3 to 4 days exposure. Fractured left ankle, severe dehydration, possible hypothermia, and head trauma. She's stable but needs immediate transport. The dispatcher's voice sharpened. Sir, can you describe the victim's condition more specifically? Conscious and alert but weak. Vital signs appear stable. The ankle fracture is her primary injury, but she's been held captive without food or water for multiple days. She's a kidnap victim. There was a pause. Kidnap victim? That's correct. She was restrained with zip ties and left to die in that mine shaft. I need immediate medical response and law enforcement. This is a crime scene. Copy that. Units are en route. ETA. 20 minutes. Are you in a safe location? Jack looked around. They were exposed, visible from the trail. If whoever had done this to Maya came back, they'd be sitting ducks. Negative. We're relocating to a more secure position. I'll maintain phone contact. He ended the call and looked at Maya. Can you put your arms around my neck? She nodded, and he lifted her again, this time in a cradle carry. He moved 50 yards down the slope to a cluster of boulders that would provide cover and concealment, then settled her in a position where he could watch the trail and the mine entrance simultaneously. Titan took up a guard position without being told, his body between Maya and any potential threat, his dark eyes scanning the forest. You're military, Maya said quietly. It wasn't a question. Was. Navy SEAL. Retired. The word tasted like ash. He wasn't retired. He'd been broken and discarded. SEAL. She laughed, a brittle sound on the edge of hysteria. I prayed for help. I prayed so hard. And God sent me a Navy SEAL and a war dog. Jack didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to tell her that he was nobody's answer to prayer, that he was just a broken tool that happened to still work when pointed in the right direction. So instead, he said, Maya, I need you to tell me everything you remember. Description of the man who took you, where he grabbed you, anything you can recall. Because the moment the cops get here, they're going to start hunting him, and the more information we can give them, the faster they'll find him. Maya took a shuddering breath and started talking. And as Jack listened, a cold fury began building in his chest, the kind he hadn't felt since the war. The kind that meant someone was going to pay. The man had been huge, Maya said, 6'3", maybe taller, built like a lumberjack, all heavy muscle and bulk. White, mid-40s, with a thick beard that was brown threaded with gray. He'd been wearing work clothes, canvas pants, flannel shirt, steel-toed boots. The kind of outfit that wouldn't look out of place anywhere in these mountains. She'd been taking soil samples for her research. She was a graduate student at CU Boulder, environmental science, studying toxic runoff from abandoned mines when he'd appeared on the trail. Friendly at first. Asked what she was doing. Offered to show her some other sites that might be useful for her work. She'd followed him. Why wouldn't she? He seemed local, knowledgeable, helpful. And this was Colorado, not some war zone. You didn't expect predators hiding in the forest. They'd walked maybe half a mile before he grabbed her from behind. A cloth over her mouth and nose, something chemical soaked into it. Chloroform, probably, or something similar. The world had tilted and gone black. When she woke up, she was in the mine shaft, bound, gagged, and he was standing over her, his face hidden in shadow because he'd positioned himself between her and the entrance, blocking what little light filtered in. He'd said 3 things. Just 3. No one knows you're here. No one will find you. You're going to die alone in the dark. Then he'd left. And she'd been alone in the black, listening to water drip and stone creak and her own heartbeat, counting down the hours until dehydration or hypothermia or despair finished what he'd started. Jack listened with the same cold focus he'd given mission briefings. Every detail mattered. Every word was data. By the time Maya finished, he had a clear picture of the suspect, big, local, or at least familiar with the area, comfortable in the wilderness, confident enough to approach a lone woman without triggering suspicion. Methodical, the zip ties, the chloroform, the chosen location all spoke to planning and premeditation. This wasn't his first time. The thought hit Jack like a physical blow. This wasn't opportunistic. This was practiced, which meant there might be others, might have been others. "Did you see his vehicle?" Jack asked. Maya nodded weakly. "Truck. Old Ford, I think. Red. 80s model, maybe. Really beat up." Jack committed it to memory. "License plate?" "I didn't see it." "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. You've given me more than enough." He heard the distant wail of sirens cutting through the mountain air. "Here comes the cavalry." The response was overwhelming. 2 sheriff's vehicles, an ambulance, a state police cruiser, and within 40 minutes, an FBI helicopter. Maya was loaded into the ambulance immediately, paramedics working on her with efficient speed. Jack gave his statement to Sheriff Tom Harding, a weathered man in his late 50s who listened with the attention of someone who'd seen too much and believed too little. But Harding believed this. Believed Jack's account, believed Maya's description, believed that somewhere in these mountains was a predator who'd done this before and would do it again. "A seal, huh?" Harding said, after Jack had finished his third recitation of events. "That explains why you're the calmest person at this crime scene. Force of habit. More than that, I think." Harding studied him. "You carried her out, alone, through an unstable mine tunnel. That takes more than training. That takes something most men don't have." Jack didn't respond. Didn't know how to explain that carrying one woman to safety didn't balance the scales when you'd left 3 men behind in the dirt. An FBI agent arrived by helicopter an hour later. Special agent. Sarah Carver, mid-30s, sharp-eyed and sharper dressed, even after a cross-country flight. She had the look of someone who took the job personally, who wouldn't stop until every question had an answer. She interviewed Jack for 2 hours, going over every detail, pushing for specifics, testing his observations against known patterns. By the time she was done, the sun was setting, and Jack was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. "We're going to need you to take us into that mine shaft," Carver said finally. "Show us exactly where you found her. Forensics needs to process the scene." "When?" "Tomorrow morning. First light. I'm having structural engineers assess the stability overnight. Make sure we're not going to collapse the whole thing when we go in." Jack nodded. "I'll be here. Bring your dog. I have a feeling we're going to need him." That night, back in his cabin, Jack sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon he'd poured but hadn't touched. Titan lay at his feet, exhausted from the day's work, but his ears still swiveled at every sound from the forest. Jack's phone buzzed. A text from his sister. "The news is reporting a rescue in Pine Ridge. Was that you?" He typed back, "Yeah. Found a woman in an abandoned mine. She's okay." His phone immediately rang. "Jack Morrison, you cannot just text me that you saved someone's life like you're commenting on the weather." "Amy, it's been a long day." "I know." "I saw the news conference. That FBI agent. She said you carried the victim out of an unstable mine shaft, alone. Are you insane? She needed help. So do you. That's why you're supposed to be resting, recovering, not playing hero in Colorado. I'm not playing anything." Jack's voice came out harder than he'd intended. "A woman was dying. I had the skills to help her. I helped her. End of story." If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. There was a long pause. When Amy spoke again, her voice was softer. "I'm proud of you, Jack. I know that doesn't mean much right now, but I am. This is the first time since you got home that you've sounded like yourself." After they hung up, Jack sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about that. The first time he'd sounded like himself. Was that true? Did pulling one woman out of a hole make him Jack Morrison again, or was he still just a broken piece pretending to function? He didn't know. But tomorrow he'd go back into that mine shaft. Tomorrow he'd help them find evidence. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough for today. The sun hadn't cleared the ridge when Jack pulled up to the mine shaft the next morning. The site had been transformed overnight. Generator-powered floodlights illuminated the entrance. Engineers had installed temporary supports, reinforcing the most dangerous sections. A command tent had been erected, filled with equipment and personnel. Agent Carver met him at the entrance, already dressed in protective gear. "Morning. You ready for this?" Jack looked at Titan, who was vibrating with anticipation in his tactical vest. "We're ready." They entered the tunnel again, this time with a full forensics team. The portable lights turned the oppressive darkness into merely dim gloom, but it was still claustrophobic, still dangerous. Jack led them to the chamber where he'd found Maya, pointing out exact positions, distances, details. The forensics team went to work, photographing everything, collecting samples, documenting the scene. But Carver was focused on something else. "The tunnel continues past this chamber," she said, pointing to a narrow passage on the far side. "We need to check it." Jack frowned. "Why?" Maya was here. "Because I've been working kidnapping cases in this region for 3 years, and in that time, 4 young women have gone missing. All of them were hikers or researchers working alone. All of them were in their 20s. None of them were ever found." She looked at him. "I think your dog found more than just Maya Brennan." Jack's stomach went cold. He looked at Titan. "You ready? To work, boy?" The dog's tail wagged once. "Ready." They pushed deeper into the mine, past the chamber, into sections that clearly hadn't been explored in decades. The tunnel twisted and descended, branching off into smaller passages. Several times they had to turn back when the way forward was blocked by cave-ins. And then Titan stopped, the same posture as yesterday. Head low, ears back, but this time he didn't whine. He just stood there, staring at a pile of fallen rock that partially blocked a side passage, and barked once. The alert bark. "He's got something," Jack said. 2 forensics techs moved forward, carefully shifting rocks. Within minutes, they'd cleared enough to reveal a small hollow behind the pile. Jack shined his flashlight into the space, and his blood turned to ice. Clothes, a backpack, a hiking boot, and bones. Human bones scattered among the debris like discarded toys. "Jesus Christ," Carver breathed. They spent 6 hours methodically excavating the hollow. As they worked, the full horror of what they'd discovered became clear. 3 sets of remains, all female, all approximately the same age as Maya. All with personal effects scattered around them, IDs, phones with long-dead batteries, water bottles they'd never gotten to drink from. Each one had been bound with zip ties. Each one had been gagged. Each one had been left to die alone in the dark. By the time they finished, the sun was setting again. Jack stood outside the mine entrance, watching as body bags were carried out one by one. 3 women who'd disappeared into the mountains and never come home, until today. Agent Carver stood beside him, her face pale but determined. Lisa Chen, Rachel Morrison, Jennifer Marks, all missing over the past 5 years, all matching the same profile, Young, educated, working alone in remote areas. "Same as Maya Brennan?" Jack said. "Exactly. We're dealing with a serial killer, someone who knows these mountains intimately, someone who uses the old mine shafts to hide his victims." "The red truck," Jack said. "That's your starting point. Sheriff Harding is already on it. Old red trucks aren't exactly rare around here, but we're checking every registered owner in a 50-mile radius." She paused. "There's one lead. A man named Carl Brennan, no relation to Maya, just unfortunate coincidence. He lives about 10 miles north of here, owns property that backs up to old mining land. Matches the physical description. Drives an old red Ford." Jack felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. "What's his background?" "Worked in the mines until the industry collapsed 6 years ago. Been living alone ever since. Few complaints from hikers about aggressive behavior, threatening trespassers. Nothing criminal, but he's made people uncomfortable." 6 years ago," Jack said slowly, "right around when the disappearances started." "Exactly. FBI's getting a warrant to search his property. We execute at dawn tomorrow." She looked at him. "I want you there. You and your dog. If there's evidence hidden on that property, Titan can find it. We'll be there." The convoy rolled up to Carl Brennan's property, just as the eastern sky was beginning to lighten from black to gray. Jack rode in the lead vehicle with Sheriff Harding, Titan in the back seat, wearing his tactical vest with police in reflective letters across the sides. The property was exactly what Jack expected: sagging farmhouse. Rusted equipment scattered across the yard, old vehicles in various states of decay. And there, parked near a collapsing barn, was the red Ford truck, 80s model, dented and rusted. Perfect match to Maya's description. "That's it," Jack said quietly. Harding keyed his radio. "All units, confirmed visual on suspect vehicle. Proceed with caution. This is not a drill. FBI tactical agents in full gear deployed around the house, cutting off all escape routes." Harding and Carver approached the front door, Jack 3 steps behind with Titan at his heel. Harding pounded on the door. "Carl Brennan, Sheriff's Department. We have a warrant. Open up." Silence. Just the wind and the distant cry of a hawk. He hammered again. "Mr. Brennan, open this door now." Still nothing. Harding nodded to a tactical agent with a battering ram. 2 hits and the door exploded inward. "Federal agents, show yourself." They cleared the house room by room with practiced efficiency. The place was a nightmare filth everywhere, rotting food, the stench of unwashed humanity thick enough to taste. But no Carl Brennan. They moved to the barn. The door stood partially open, morning light slicing through gaps in the walls to illuminate a workbench covered with tools. Titan's nose was working overtime, and suddenly his body went rigid. He stared at the barn and let out a low, continuous growl. "He's in there," Jack said flatly. The tactical team moved in, weapons up. "Carl Brennan, FBI, we know you're here. Come out with your hands visible," a voice echoed from somewhere in the back of the barn. Deep, calm, utterly unbothered. "You're trespassing on private property." "We have a warrant, Mr. Brennan. Come out now. Hands where we can see them." There was a long pause filled only with creaking wood and wind. Then a figure emerged from behind a stack of lumber. Carl Brennan was exactly as Maya had described him: massive, bearded, dressed in work clothes. But his eyes were what made Jack's skin crawl. They were flat, empty. The eyes of a man who'd stopped seeing other people as human somewhere along the way. "On the ground!" an agent shouted. "Get on the ground now!" Brennan moved with deliberate slowness, as if he had all the time in the world. He sank to his knees, then lay flat, hands spread. Agents were on him in seconds, cuffing him and hauling him to his feet. As they led him past Jack, Brennan's gaze fixed on him. A slow smile spread across his face. You're the one who found her. The girl in the mine. Jack said nothing, but Titan lunged forward with a vicious snarl, straining against the leash with enough force to pull Jack forward a step. Easy, Jack said quietly, though the command was for himself as much as the dog. Smart dog, Brennan said, still smiling. Shame. I was planning to go back for her in another day or two. Let her suffer a little longer first. Make it last. The rage that had been building in Jack since finding Maya broke through like a dam bursting. He moved before thought caught up to action, closing the distance between himself and Brennan in 2 strides. His hand closed around the man's shirt, and he slammed him against the nearest vehicle hard enough to dent the metal. You left her to die, Jack said, his voice deadly quiet. You left all of them to die. They were nothing, Brennan said, that empty smile never wavering. Just stupid girls who didn't know their place. My mountains. My rules. Jack's fist pulled back, every muscle in his body screaming to unleash the violence he'd been trained to deliver, to make this animal feel even a fraction of the terror his victims had felt. Jack. Sheriff Harding's hand landed on his shoulder, grip firm. Don't. He's not worth losing yourself over. Jack held Brennan's gaze for another 5 seconds. Then he released him, stepping back. You're right, he's not. They dragged Brennan to a patrol car and locked him inside. Jack stood watching, his hands shaking slightly with adrenaline that had nowhere to go. Agent Carver approached him. We found evidence in the barn, zip ties, same brand used on the victims, chloroform, and a journal. Her voice went hard. He documented everything, every abduction, every minute those women suffered. He enjoyed it. Jack felt physically ill. Will it stick? Can you convict him? DNA evidence, physical evidence, his own written confession, and testimony from a living victim? He'll never see daylight again. The trial took 8 months. Jack attended every day, sitting in the gallery with the families of the lost women. He watched Maya Brennan take the stand, her voice strong and unwavering as she described what had been done to her. He watched the families of Lisa Chen, Rachel Morrison, and Jennifer Marks weep as forensic experts detailed how their daughters had died. And through it all, Carl Brennan sat expressionless, showing nothing. No remorse, no emotion, nothing. The jury convicted him in less than 4 hours. The judge sentenced him to 4 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. As marshals led him away, Brennan looked directly at Jack, and for the first time, the smile was gone. In its place was something that might have been fear. Good, Jack thought. Let him be afraid. Let him spend the rest of his miserable life knowing that one of his victims survived, that a broken seal and a war dog brought him down. Life moved forward after the trial, though forward was a relative term. Jack stayed in Pine Ridge, partly because he'd signed a year lease on the cabin, and partly because leaving felt like running again. The town treated him differently now, less like a stranger and more like someone who belonged. Maya Brennan recovered fully. She finished her graduate degree and took a job with the EPA working on abandoned mine reclamation. She visited Jack once, about 3 months after the trial, bringing coffee and sitting on his porch like it was the most natural thing in the world. I wanted to thank you, she said. Properly, for saving my life. Jack shook his head. Thank Titan. He found you. I already thanked him. She'd brought a special bone that Titan was currently destroying with great enthusiasm. But you're the one who listened to him, who went into that mine shaft, who carried me out, who made sure that monster would never hurt anyone else. She paused, studying him with those dark, intelligent eyes. I know you're carrying something, I don't know what, and you don't have to tell me. But I need you to understand something. You didn't fail me. You saved me. And because of you, 3 families got to bring their daughters home. That matters, Jack. That matters more than you know." Jack felt something crack inside his chest. "It doesn't bring back the men I lost." "No," Maya agreed softly. "Nothing will. But it means you're still capable of good, still capable of protecting people, still capable of being the hero you trained to be." She stood to leave, then turned back. "Don't forget that." After she left, Jack sat on the porch for a long time, Titan's head resting on his knee. "Maybe she's right," he said quietly. "Maybe this is what we're supposed to do now. Find the lost, bring them home." Titan's tail thumped once against the deck. 6 months later, Jack got a call from Sheriff Harding. A 10-year-old boy had wandered away from a camping trip. Search and rescue had been looking for 14 hours with no luck. "I know it's asking a lot," Harding said, "but would you and Titan be willing to help?" Jack looked at the dog, who was already at the door, tail wagging. "We'll be there in 20 minutes." They found the boy 6 hours later, cold and scared but unharmed. When Jack carried him back to his parents, the mother's sobs of relief echoed across the mountains. The father couldn't speak, could only grip Jack's hand with both of his, eyes saying everything words couldn't. After that, the calls came regularly. Missing hikers, lost children, evidence searches for investigations. Jack and Titan became an unofficial part of the county's search and rescue operations, working alongside Harding's department and FBI units when needed. Jack found himself training other handlers, teaching them about working with military dogs, about trust and communication, and the unbreakable bond between handler and K9 partner. He discovered he was good at teaching, patient in a way he'd never been before. The nightmares about Jalalabad didn't stop. Rodriguez, Chen, Williams, their faces still, haunted his sleep. But now, when he woke up reaching for a rifle that wasn't there, he had something to focus on: mission planning, training schedules, equipment maintenance, purpose. 1 year after finding Maya Brennan in that mineshaft, Jack stood at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new K9 training facility just outside Pine Ridge. Sheriff Harding stood beside him, along with Agent Carver, Maya, and about 100 other people. The facility had been funded by federal grants, state money, and private donations. It would train dogs and handlers for search and rescue, evidence detection, disaster response, and it bore a simple name, carved into a wooden sign above the entrance: the Titan Center. "You did this," Harding said quietly as the crowd applauded. "You and that remarkable dog." Jack looked down at Titan, who sat at attention in his tactical vest, the silver badge on his collar catching the sunlight. The dog looked up at him, and Jack would have sworn there was pride in those dark eyes. "He's the hero," Jack said. "I just followed where he led." "Maybe that's the point," Harding said. "Sometimes we all need someone to follow, someone who knows the way when we're lost." That evening, Jack sat on his porch with coffee and mountain air and Titan at his feet. The emptiness was still there. It always would be. The weight of the men he'd lost would never fully lift. But there was something else now, something that had been missing so long he'd forgotten it existed: hope. He looked at Titan, who watched him with that patient, steady gaze that had seen him through the worst days of his life. "You know what, boy?" Jack said quietly. "I think we're going to be all right." Titan's tail thumped once against the deck, and in the fading light of the Colorado evening, a former Navy SEAL and his K9 partner sat together, no longer running from the past, but ready to face whatever came next. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come from forgetting the people you've lost. It comes from honoring them by saving the ones you can. And sometimes all it takes to find your way home is a dog who refuses to give up on you, who leads you into the darkness not to lose you, but to help you find someone else, someone who needs saving just as much as you do. The weeks following the trial brought an unexpected rhythm to Jack's life. The cabin that had once felt like a prison cell slowly transformed into something resembling a home. He started keeping fresh flowers on the kitchen table, wildflowers he and Titan would find during their morning hikes. The bourbon bottle that had been his constant companion disappeared into the back of a cabinet, untouched for days, then weeks. Sheriff Harding stopped by one afternoon in early autumn, the aspens turning gold on the mountainsides. He found Jack in the yard, building a training obstacle course for Titan balance beams, tunnel crawls, jump platforms. "Looks like you're planning to stick around," Harding observed, leaning against his cruiser. Jack hammered in another post before answering. "Seems that way." "Good, because I've got a proposition for you." Harding pulled out a folder. "County's approved funding for an official K-9 search and rescue unit. They want someone to run it. Someone with actual experience, not just good intentions." Jack wiped sweat from his forehead, studying the sheriff. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a purpose. Pay's not great, but it comes with benefits and a badge. You'd coordinate with my department, state police, FBI when needed. Train handlers, respond to emergencies, build the program from the ground up." Harding paused. "You'd be saving lives, Jack." "Officially." Jack looked at Titan, who'd stopped playing to watch the conversation with interest. The dog's tail gave a hopeful wag. "When do I start?" The paperwork took 3 weeks. By mid-October, Jack Morrison was officially the director of the Pine Ridge County K-9 Search and Rescue Unit, a grand title for a one-man, one-dog operation working out of a converted storage building behind the sheriff's office. But it was real. It was legitimate. It was something to build. The first call came on a Wednesday morning. An elderly man with dementia had wandered away from his care facility during the night. Family was frantic. Temperature had dropped to near freezing. Jack and Titan found him 4 hours later, huddled under a bridge 2 miles from town, confused but alive. When Jack wrapped his own jacket around the old man's shoulders and helped him to his feet, the man looked up at him with tears streaming down his weathered face. "I was lost," he whispered. "I couldn't find my way home." "I know," Jack said gently, "but you're found now. Let's get you back." The second call came 3 days later. A teenager had gone missing after a fight with her parents. Possible runaway, possible suicide risk. They found her sitting at the edge of a cliff, her feet dangling over emptiness, phone in her hand, with a goodbye message typed but not sent. Jack approached slowly, Titan at his side. He didn't speak at first, just sat down next to her, letting his own feet hang over the edge. "Hell of a view," he said finally. The girl didn't look at him. "I wanted to see it one more time. Before?" She nodded, fresh tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her face. "Nobody would even care. Your parents are down there losing their minds with worry. Sheriff's got half the county out looking. My dog tracked you for 3 miles because we all care whether you come home." Jack paused. "And I know something about standing on edges, wondering if the fall would hurt worse than the staying. So I'm not going to tell you everything gets better or any of that bullshit. But I am going to tell you that jumping solves exactly nothing." "How do you know?" "Because I've lost people to the fall. Good people. People who thought they were doing everyone a favor by checking out early, and all they did was leave. Holes in the world shaped exactly like them." Jack's voice roughed. "Don't leave a hole, kid. The world's got enough of those already." She turned to look at him finally, really seeing him, seeing the scars, the shadows in his eyes, the weight he carried. Seeing someone who'd walked through his own fire and somehow come out the other side. "Will you walk me back?" she asked in a small voice. "Yeah," Jack said, standing and offering his hand. "I'll walk you back." By December, the calls were coming almost daily. Lost hikers, missing children. Evidence searches for criminal investigations. Jack and Titan became a fixture in the county, the seal and his dog who could find anyone, anywhere, no matter what. But it was the case 2 days before Christmas that changed everything. A young mother had disappeared from a grocery store parking lot in broad daylight. Her car was still there, engine running, door open, purse on the seat. Her 4-year-old daughter had been found sitting in the back seat alone and terrified, saying only that the bad man took Mommy. Jack arrived at the scene within 30 minutes. FBI was already there. Agent Carver had driven up from Denver the moment she heard. She met him at the perimeter, her face grim. Emma Hartley, 28 years old. Disappeared approximately 2 hours ago. Witness saw a man force her into a dark blue van, late model Chevrolet. Partial plate, 47X, rest obscured. Jack's mind was already working. The daughter. Did she see anything? Won't talk to anyone except to ask for her mother. Carver's jaw tightened. Jack, I think this is connected to Brennan. He's in prison. But he wasn't working alone. We found communications in his journal, references to the other and my partner. We thought it was just his psychosis talking to himself. But now, she gestured at the crime scene, this is too similar. Daylight abduction, confident approach, van instead of truck but same MO. Brennan had a partner, and that partner just activated. Jack felt ice water flood his veins. He looked at Titan, who was already in his vest, already focused, already ready to work. Give me something with her scent. They gave him a jacket from her car. Titan pressed his nose to it, drawing in the scent molecules that made Emma Hartley unique in all the world. Then his head came up, nose working the air, and he began to track. The trail led away from the parking lot, across a side street, into a residential area. Titan moved with absolute certainty, following a scent trail Jack couldn't perceive but trusted completely. They walked for 20 minutes, the dog occasionally pausing to correct his trajectory, until they reached an alley behind an abandoned warehouse. Titan stopped at a dumpster and barked once. The alert bark. Jack looked inside and found a woman's shoe, Emma's shoe, based on the photos, and there, on the ground beside the dumpster, tire tracks. Fresh, wide wheelbase, consistent with a van. He stopped. Here, Jack said into his radio. Changed vehicles or transferred her to the back. Tire tracks suggest he headed west on Mountain View Road. Copy that, came Harding's voice. We're setting up roadblocks now. But Jack knew roadblocks wouldn't work. Whoever this was had been planning this for months, maybe years. He had safe houses, backup routes, contingencies. He'd watched Brennan get caught and learned from those mistakes. Titan, Jack said quietly. Keep working. Find her. The dog's nose went back to the ground, picking up the scent trail where the van had been. It led west, just as Jack had predicted, but then doubled back through a series of alleys and side streets. Deliberate counter-surveillance, designed to throw off pursuit. They tracked for 3 hours, moving through the growing darkness, following a trail that seemed to go nowhere. Jack's legs burned, his chest ached, but he pushed on because somewhere out there was a young mother who'd been stolen from her daughter on Christmas week, and he'd be damned if he'd let another woman die in the dark. Just before midnight, in a section of forest 10 miles north of town, Titan stopped at the base of an old fire watchtower. The structure was ancient, 40 feet of rusted steel and rotting wood, condemned years ago, but fresh tire tracks led to its base. And from somewhere above, Jack heard a sound that made his blood freeze. A woman's scream, cut short. Jack didn't think. He ran for the ladder, Titan barking frantically at the base. The rungs were slick with ice and age, some missing entirely, but he climbed with the speed of desperation. 40 feet up, gasping for breath, he reached the enclosed observation room at the top. The door was locked. He didn't bother trying to open it. He threw his full weight against it, and the rotted wood splintered under the impact. He tumbled inside, rolled, came up in a crouch. The room was lit by a single battery-powered lantern. Emma Hartley was zip-tied to a chair in the center, gagged, her face already showing the bruises of a beating. And standing over her, holding a knife, was a man Jack had never seen before. Mid-50s, thin and wiry, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent his life in the mountains. He wore a hunter's jacket and boots, completely unremarkable except for his eyes. Those eyes were the same as Brennan's, flat, empty, dead. "You must be the SEAL," the man said calmly, as if they were meeting at a coffee shop instead of 40 feet up in an abandoned tower with a kidnap victim bleeding between them. "Carl told me about you, said you were good. Said you and your dog were the reason he got caught." "Put the knife down," Jack said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "It's over. Police have this area surrounded." "No, they don't." The man smiled. "I've been watching for hours. You came alone. Just you and your dog." He pressed the knife closer to Emma's throat. She whimpered around the gag. "Always working. Alone. That's your weakness. Carl worked alone too. That's why he failed." "And you're going to succeed?" Jack took a step closer, hands visible, posture non-threatening but ready to explode into action. "How? Kill her? Kill me? Then what? You're trapped up here." "I'm not trapped. I have what I came for." The man's smile widened. "I've been planning this for 6 years. The others were practice. Emma here, she's the real prize. Carl was supposed to help me with her, but you took him away, so I had to do it myself." "Why?" Jack asked, stalling for time, calculating angles and distances. The room was maybe 12 feet across. The man was 8 feet away. The knife was at Emma's throat. One wrong move, and she'd bleed out before he could apply pressure. "Why, Emma? What did she ever do to you?" "She smiled at me." The man's voice went soft, dreamy. 10 years ago, she smiled at me in a coffee shop. I was nobody. Nothing. And this beautiful woman smiled at me like I mattered. I never forgot. I watched her get married, have a baby, build a life. And I knew that life should have been mine. Jack's stomach turned. This wasn't random. This was obsession, refined and aged over a decade into something monstrous. "So you took her. I'm correcting a mistake. She should have been mine from the beginning. She doesn't love you. She will. Once I remove the obstacles, the husband, the child, the old life. She'll understand it was always supposed to be us." Jack saw it in the man's eyes. The absolute delusion, the complete detachment from reality. This wasn't someone who could be reasoned with or negotiated with. This was someone who would kill Emma the moment he felt cornered, which meant Jack had to change the equation. "You're right," Jack said, shifting his stance slightly. "Carl made mistakes. He acted on impulse, didn't plan well enough. But you're smarter than him. You've been planning for years. You're not going to get caught like he did." The man's grip on the knife loosened slightly. "You see it." "I do. You're the intelligent one, the patient one. Carl was just a blunt instrument. You're an artist." Jack took another small step. 7 feet now. That's why you'll understand when I say this has to end differently than you planned." "What do you mean?" "I mean you can't keep her. You know that. The police are coming, maybe not now, maybe not tonight, but soon. They'll track your van, find this place. You've got maybe 6 hours before this tower is surrounded." Jack's voice dropped, confidential, conspiratorial. "But you're smart enough to have a backup plan, an exit strategy. Maybe a place across the border, new identity, fresh start." The man was listening now, knife wavering. "Here's what I'm offering," Jack continued. "Let her go. Take me instead. I'm the one who caught your partner. I'm the one who ruined your plans. take me, and you've got a hostage who actually matters to law enforcement. Former SEAL. Current search and rescue. Director. They'll negotiate for me. Give you time to execute whatever escape plan you've got." Emma's eyes went wide, shaking her head frantically. The man studied Jack, considering. "Why would you do that?" "Because she's got a 4-year-old daughter who needs her mother." Jack's voice roughened. "And I've already lost everyone who ever mattered to me. One more sacrifice won't make a difference." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind whistling through the gaps in the tower walls. Then the man smiled. "You're lying. You think I'm stupid enough to trade a woman I've wanted for 10 years for some broken soldier with a death wish?" He pressed the knife against Emma's throat hard enough to draw blood. "Nice try, SEAL, but I'm keeping what's mine." Jack moved, not toward the man, toward the lantern. He kicked it hard, sending it flying across the room where it shattered against the wall. The observation room plunged into absolute darkness. The man screamed in rage and confusion. Jack heard Emma's chair tip over, heard her hit the floor. He dove toward the sound of the man's voice, his hands finding cloth, then an arm, then the wrist holding the knife. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and fury. The man was stronger than he looked, all wiry muscle and desperate strength. He tried to bring the knife around, but Jack had the wrist locked, controlling the weapon even as they grappled in the pitch black. They rolled across the floor, slamming into walls, into furniture. The man kneed Jack in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Jack responded with an elbow to the face that shattered something wet and crunchy. The knife clattered away into darkness. Jack heard it skitter across the floor, somewhere out of reach. The man heard it too, and lunged in that direction. Jack grabbed his ankle and yanked him back, then climbed up his body, fists driving into ribs, solar plexus, face. The man bucked and thrashed, got one hand around Jack's throat, squeezing. Jack saw stars in the darkness, felt his vision narrowing. He brought his forehead down in a vicious headbutt, felt the man's nose flatten completely. The grip loosened. Jack gasped for air, then drove his fist down one more time, a hammer blow to the temple. The man went still. Jack rolled off him, gasping, everything hurting. He pulled out his phone, activated the flashlight. The man was unconscious, blood streaming from his shattered nose and mouth. Jack zip-tied his hands behind his back with restraints from his tactical pack, then did the same to his ankles. Then he crawled to Emma, gently righting her chair. She was crying, blood on her throat, but not much. The cut was superficial. "You're okay," Jack said, his voice rough from being choked. "You're okay. I've got you." He cut her restraints and removed the gag. Emma immediately wrapped her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. "My daughter," she gasped. "Lily, is she? She's safe. She's with your husband right now, waiting for you to come home." Jack held her as she shook. "And that's exactly where you're going, home. Tonight." Dawn was breaking over the mountains by the time the FBI tactical teams finished processing the scene. The man whose name turned out to be Thomas Ridgway, a local handyman who'd lived in Pine Ridge for 15 years without anyone suspecting his obsession, was taken away in handcuffs, still unconscious. Emma Hartley was reunited with her husband and daughter at the hospital. Jack watched from a distance as the little girl ran into her mother's arms, watched as the family held each other, and wept with relief. Then he quietly left before anyone could thank him. He drove back to his cabin as the sun climbed higher, Titan beside him in the passenger seat. The dog had been frantic when Jack had descended the tower, had checked him over with careful sniffs and worried whines until satisfied his handler was intact. "I'm okay, buddy," Jack said now, scratching behind the dog's ears. "We're both okay." But as he pulled into his driveway, he saw he wasn't alone. A truck was parked out front, and Maya Brennan was sitting on his porch steps, 2 cups of coffee beside her. "Heard about last night?" she said as he climbed out. "Figured you might need this." Jack took the coffee and sat beside her. They drank in comfortable silence as the sun painted the valley gold. "You know what I realized?" Maya said finally. "After everything we've been through, I never asked. Why didn't you give up on me? When you found me in that mine, you could have called for help and waited. Instead, you carried me out yourself. Why?" Jack was quiet for a long moment. "Because 3 men died under my command in Afghanistan. I made a bad call, and they paid for it. And I've spent every day since wondering if I could have done something different, something better, something that would have brought them home." He looked at her. "I couldn't save them, but I could save you, and Emma, and everyone else who's still out here waiting to be found. You're not responsible for their deaths, Jack. Maybe not. But I am responsible for what I do with the time they don't get to have." He set down his coffee. "They don't get to see another sunrise, fall in love again, have kids, grow old. They don't get any of it. So the least I can do is make sure that when someone else needs help, when someone else is lost in the dark, I'm there. I'm the one who shows up. I'm the one who doesn't quit until they're found." Maya reached over and took his hand. "You're a good man, Jack Morrison. I'm just a broken soldier with a smart dog." "No," she said firmly. "You're a hero who hasn't figured out how to forgive himself yet. But you will. Give it time." Over the next 6 months, the K-9 Search and Rescue Unit grew. Jack brought in 2 more handlers, both former military with their own trauma and their own need for purpose. He trained them the way he'd been trained: hard, thorough, accepting, nothing less than excellence. The facility expanded. More funding came through, equipment improved, training programs developed. What had started as 1 man and 1 dog became a model program that other counties started copying. Jack found himself speaking at conferences, teaching courses, consulting on cases across the state. His reputation grew. The media loved the story, "Broken Seal finds redemption, saving lives in the mountains." He hated the attention, but tolerated it, because it brought visibility to the program, which meant more funding, which meant saving more lives. But the work was what mattered. The phone calls that came in the middle of the night. The desperate parents, the missing hikers, the children who wandered into the forest and couldn't find their way back. Every call was a mission. Every search was a chance to bring someone home. Not all of them ended well. Jack found 3 bodies that spring: a hiker who'd fallen off a cliff, a suicide in the woods, an elderly woman who'd frozen to death before they could reach her. Each one hit him hard, a reminder that he couldn't save everyone, couldn't fix everything. But for every loss, there were 5 victories. 5 people brought home alive, 5 families made whole again, 5 lives saved because Jack Morrison had shown up and refused to quit. On a warm evening in July, 1 year after he'd taken the job, Jack stood at the Titan Center with Sheriff Harding and Agent Carver, watching a graduation ceremony. 5 new K-9 teams had completed their certification, ready to deploy across Colorado. "You built something real here," Harding said, nodding at the graduates. "Something that's going to save lives for decades." "Titan built it," Jack said, watching his dog demonstrate a search technique for the crowd. "I just followed where he led." "You keep saying that," Carver observed, "but I've worked with a lot of K-9 handlers. The dog is important, but it's the handler who makes the difference. The handler who decides to go into the dark mine shaft, to climb the tower, to put themselves between innocent people and the predators." She looked at him. "That's you, Jack. That's the choice you keep making." That night, alone on his porch with Titan at his feet, Jack pulled out his phone. He scrolled to a photo he kept locked away most of the time. Rodriguez, Chen, and Williams standing together in full gear, grinning at the camera during a rare moment of peace in Afghanistan. "I hope I'm making you proud," Jack said quietly. I hope you know I'm not wasting the time you gave me." Titan lifted his head, resting it on Jack's knee. The dog's dark eyes held something that looked like understanding. Jack's phone buzzed. A text from Harding, "Possible missing person in the National Forest. Can you respond?" Jack looked at Titan, who was already standing, already alert, already ready. "Yeah," Jack said, standing up and grabbing his gear. "We can respond, because that's who he was now, not the broken soldier who'd arrived in Pine Ridge a year ago, drowning in guilt and bourbon, not the lieutenant who'd made a bad call and lost good men. He was Jack Morrison, director of the K-9 Search and Rescue Unit. He was the man who showed up when someone needed help, the handler who trusted his dog's instincts more than his own doubts, the SEAL who'd learned that heroism wasn't about never failing, it was about refusing to stay down when you did. And as he loaded Titan into the truck and headed out into the night toward another person who needed saving, Jack Morrison finally understood what Maya had tried to tell him months ago. He wasn't responsible for the men he couldn't save, but he was responsible for honoring their sacrifice by saving everyone he possibly could, by being the kind of man they'd believed him to be, by living the kind of life that made their deaths mean something more than just tragedy, by showing up again and again, no matter how dark it got or how hopeless it seemed, by being the light in someone else's darkness, by being the one who never ever stopped looking. The mountains rose around him as he drove, ancient and indifferent. But somewhere up there, someone was lost. Someone was scared. Someone was hoping against hope that rescue would come, and rescue was coming. In the form of a former Navy SEAL and his Belgian Malinois, both of them scarred, both of them damaged, both of them absolutely refusing to let one more person die alone in the dark, not on their watch. Not tonight. Not ever again. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments, what was your favorite moment? Was it Titan's loyalty, Jack's protection, or the moment justice was served? We read every comment. God bless, and see you in the next story.